Welcome to the Newton County Insider Podcast, where the outsider gets the inside scoop on all things Newton County and the surrounding areas.
Your wife said something about you were just training your dog. Your dog got back? What are you training it for?
To hunt.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. What were you thinking?
I have two that many years ago, my son's dog, my son had a dog.
Yeah.
That I'm in China on vacation. And my son, I call home every day, make sure the house hasn't burned down.
Yeah.
And my son says, "Hey, can we get a dog?" I'm like, "Absolutely not. No, we can't." Well, needless to say, when I got home from China, we had a dog.
Oh, wow.
And he's like, "Oh, don't worry about it. It's going to my girlfriend's house." Well, it never did. It never left. And so I kind of adopted the dog. He has since married another girl and has all kinds of kids and stuff. But I still have this dog. Well, one day he was a man about town.
Okay.
If you get my drift.
Yeah.
And I went into the gas station one day and the lady says, "Hey, do you have," and started describing my dog. I'm like, "Oh God, what did Kirko do now?" She said, "Well, I think he got my lab pregnant."
Oh, no.
Well, I was getting near the end of my coroner training, and we had that, I don't know how long you've been here, we had that young man that drowned out at Willis Slough.
I've been here about a year.
Oh, no, this has been eons ago. And we couldn't find him. I mean, we knew exactly where he went down. There were multiple witnesses. They're all pointing where he went down, but we couldn't side scan sonar, divers, waders, could not find him. Brought dogs in. Finally, somebody said, "Why don't we call the dogs?" Well, at this point, I'm ready to call a psychic.
Right.
And brought the dogs in, and boom.
Underwater.
Yeah.
Really?
And I'm like, I could do this. So when that lady told me that her dog was pregnant by default, my dog, I said, "I'll take two." And we were the youngest. They were 3 months old when we started going down to Camp Atterbury doing the cadaver dog training. And they do land, water. They can find things. When you test them, the test is 10 feet underground.
Oh.
Or 10 feet underwater. And they've found both.
No kidding.
Yeah, it's amazing what a dog's nose can do.
So are your dogs, they got certified?
They're not certified. I never went through the certification class because you have to belong to a group. There's in Indiana, there's no such thing as a certification. Okay. There's not a state certified. You're certified if you belong to a group, and that group has rules, and they make up their own certification.
Okay.
And we went with a couple of different groups a couple different times, and I didn't like it. So we're trained, and they've kind of aged out now. I mean, they still do it. I have teeth that I keep, and every now and then I'll just take them. Like we're going to go out for a walk. Well, we go down to south of Attica, really hilly place, and I'll take the teeth along with me, and I'll just drop them, and then we'll circle back around and see if they hit on them.
Wow.
And they still do. So
that's amazing.
Oh yeah, their noses are phenomenal.
Yeah.
But I digress. I cut off on things.
No, it's good stuff. It's ironic because a couple buddies and I were talking. Oh, it's probably been 3-4 years ago now, and we were talking about cadaver dogs and stuff. I can't remember. Maybe it was longer than that because I think we were on the topic when that mine. It wasn't in Chile, was it? There was a mine that collapsed, and they ended up.
That was in China, wasn't it?
Was it China where they brought in that drilling rig and punched the hole to rescue them all out of there?
Yeah. Well, maybe I have a different one. There's one going on right now somewhere where there's like 200 miners trapped.
Oh, really?
Yeah. A lot of them are dead, but
okay, that's too bad.
Well, we've had cadaver dogs here in Newton. Now, our dogs, we've never done a search. I take that back. We did one this summer. We did a search in Jasper County. Came up with nothing. After a full day in the blistering hot sun and wading through the river, the quote-unquote river, we found out that witnesses said that he wasn't there. They saw him leave. I'm like, so why were we out here?
Yeah.
And then we did 2 searches up in Lake County where we were called in to help with that. We did a search here in Newton County. The FBI called this summer, and a girl that went missing in Illinois that they wouldn't give me the story.
Yeah.
But there were 14 FBI agents down here.
Wow.
So it was something big.
Yeah.
But we ran the dog. I ran my dogs, and then the next day they brought in their dogs, and nobody found anything. So I didn't feel so bad then when my dogs didn't find, because they had telephone, the pings that put her there,
Right.
but we found nothing.
So, interesting. Well, maybe we'll dive back into that.
Okay.
So just kind of want to start off. So Scott McCord.
Yep.
Newton County Coroner.
Newton County Coroner.
Yeah. So tell me about yourself.
What do you want to know?
Let's start with what are your hobbies?
I don't have any.
No hobbies.
I have, well, everything kind of revolves around coroner.
Oh, okay.
And maybe we can delve into that as we progress. But right now, and I'm hopefully we'll revisit it. Right now, I'm the president of a group, a nonprofit called Identify Indiana.
Okay.
And that all sprung from, I think, why you asked me here with the unidentifieds I had here in Newton County. I have now taken on the job of identifying all of the unidentifieds in the state of Indiana.
Wow.
Me along with a very good group of other people, but we're officially, as of November, we're officially a nonprofit.
Sweet. 501c3?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet. We're just designated a nonprofit.
Okay.
I'm working on the other.
Okay. Yeah, so then you could take in some donations to help fund dogs or whatever it was, right?
There are grants out there available up to $1 million, but we can't get them because, well, one, we're not a nonprofit. I can't run it through the county because then the county would want to keep all the money. And one of my counterparts that helped me form this, that put the idea in my head, who is Dr. Krista Latham. She's Indiana's only board-certified forensic anthropologist. Teaches down at the University of Indianapolis.
Okay.
She's the one that put the idea in my head. So her and I are the impetus of this, I guess you would say. But I just got an email 2 days ago from one of the counties that said, we will give you all of our unidentifieds. I'm like, okay, how many can they have? Who knew? I don't even have a number yet because where they're stored, where the remains are stored, they don't have them cataloged yet.
Wow.
But apparently we're talking somewhere in the neighborhood of 20.
Wow.
But it's become a passion of mine. That's my hobby.
Yeah.
Is trying to identify the unidentifieds.
What a noble hobby.
It's after identifying the ones we had here in Newton County, and meeting the families of these people. It's like a passion. I've now, those people, those families are now part of my family. I'm part of theirs.
Mm-hmm.
They call me, the last one we identified, their family calls me cousin. And I meet with the family of our very first unidentified that we had. I meet with that family every year. When I fly out east for a memorial service for my dad, we hook up. They live in Boston. Hook up and do lunch. So it's, people think that it's just you identify them and you send them away. No, it's they become part of your family.
Yeah. Well, you put a piece of their family together for them, right? I mean,
the word that a lot of people like to use is closure. It's not really closure. It's just the fact that they now know what happened. The second one we identified, and hopefully we'll get into all of these later. The second one we identified was a young man that was killed by Larry Eiler, which was a serial killer that worked from Chicago to Terre Haute. And when my wife and I actually loaded the remains up in my car, we drove them down to the funeral home in their hometown in Kentucky. And I got to meet his mom. His dad had passed away. His mom was very frail. And she gave me the sweetest little hug. And she said, I woke up every day for 37 and a half years wondering when Johnny was coming home.
Wow.
I mean, I'm bawling like a baby at this point. Her eldest son was there. This guy was like 6'3", 280. I mean, he was just a solid mass of muscle. And he's crying. That's what makes it worthwhile. It's that. Closure is a horrible word to use because there's no such thing as closure when you've lost a loved one. Right. It just doesn't happen. But the them finding out.
Yeah.
I'm finding out what happened in that case was, I'm sure, a horrible shock, but at least they know now where he's at, and they had the chance to bury him.
Yeah. That's amazing stuff. Well, that took a turn I didn't quite expect, so that's good. We'll kind of go back to who you are. I just kind of want to lay some foundation of, what ties you to the area and stuff like that. If you're in the market or thinking about switching to lithium batteries, you have to go check out Dakota Lithium Batteries. I installed a 36-volt set of batteries for my trolling motor and installed their cranking battery for the motor. These things are a game changer. They have batteries for solar equipment, golf carts, cars, boats, the duck blinds, and much more. Dakota Lithium Batteries are also backed by an 11-year warranty. For more information, go check them out online or give us a call at 308-379-8280. And so I did a little research on you. It looks like you actually graduated from Newton County, so you've been here a long time.
My parents are from Morocco. They're from here in Morocco. My dad was actually born in Hammond. My mom was born in Mount Ayr, and they grew up here in Morocco. My dad was a scout leader, and believe it or not, there was a theater here in town many, many years ago, and my dad ran that. He was in the Navy. He was a Navy man. We ended up moving from Newton County to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, where I was born, and then my dad was killed in the Navy, and we ended up moving back. We ended up in Brook. So I've been 60 years. I'm 64 now, so 60 years in Newton County. I started working for Newton County in 1982 as an EMT. We were the first class of paramedics in 1986, so we brought the ambulance service up from a basic life support service to ALS service, paramedic service, and I retired from there in 2016.
Okay.
And I've been with the coroner's office. I was a deputy coroner prior to running for coroner. My numbers are probably going to be off here. I was thinking I was deputy coroner for 4 years, and then I ran for coroner in 2008. Obviously won and did 2 terms. Sat out a year and a half, and while the new coroner was in, he decided that he was taking a job outside of the county, which excluded him from being the coroner. I was on the county council at the time. I didn't like being on the county council. I liked being the coroner. So I stepped back in. So I've been doing the coroner business for 15 years now.
Yeah, you stole one of my questions, which is great. You kind of broke the mold a little bit, because when I did some research, it looks like you could only be the coroner 8 out of 12 years, but kind of due to him stepping out, it allowed you to kind of fill that in then, huh?
Correct. You can serve 2 terms as coroner elect, but then I served 3.5 years as coroner appoint.
Okay.
Or coroner appointed.
Okay.
So yeah, it's been quite a ride.
That's cool. And just hearing your passion for it, I can't imagine there's probably anybody better fit for it. So it's amazing.
Well, hopefully in the next, by the end of the next 4 years, somebody will step in, because I will have termed out and probably aged out by then.
Okay. And so I guess, what's the election cycle for you? Are you in your, do you get elected every 8 years, or is it every 4 years?
It's every 4 years.
Okay.
I was just elected last year, so took
Okay.
office again this year.
Okay. Awesome. Now I'm trying to remember if I voted for you. Did anybody compete against you?
Nobody ran against me, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah. So I would have voted for you. That's good.
It's one of those jobs that people just aren't knocking down the door to do.
Well, and that was one of my questions I had for you. I thought maybe, and this is going to show my ignorance here, but I thought maybe you were like a coroner is somebody that kind of either runs a funeral home or is a doctor of some sort, but that's not necessarily the case.
No, not in the state of Indiana. In the state of Indiana, it's a popular vote, but you do have to, once you're elected, you're required to take the state mandated training. You've got a year to complete that, and technically, You don't have to take that training. What they do is the state passed a law that said if you don't take the training, they take your pay away. So you'd be doing the job for free.
Okay.
Which
Yeah.
I would do this job for free.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just how much I love doing this.
Yeah, I believe that. So somebody that was like, so say somebody's interested in your role. If I remember correctly, it's like 40 hours worth of training you have to complete to get that certificate.
It's 40 hours of classroom time. Then you do an internship where you actually set in on an autopsy, and the pathologist runs you through, make sure you can draw fluids, draw blood, urine, and vitreous fluid, and maybe a little bit of evidence collection. And then you have to write 5 cases. Now, that doesn't mean you have to have 5 cases. They actually have a book that has scenarios, if you will, and you have to write your own case from that and send it. It all gets sent up to Michigan. For some reason, Michigan is the hub of all of this, and then they grade it. They will send back whether you pass or fail.
Okay. So that kind of works as a little bit of a segue into a question I had, and one of the guys I work with would be mad if I don't ask this. So he sent me a link of kind of some like odd facts, and I didn't know this until he sent it to me, so I looked it up. And so Indiana Code 36-2-14-5 says that the coroner would be the one who has to commit the sheriff to the county jail, and from that point forward, you would have custody of the jail and the inmates in it. Did you know that?
Under certain circumstances. And if you really read into that, it means that if the sheriff doesn't have an undersheriff, then I would step in and take control.
Oh, so like a deputy sheriff could,
right? Well, Illinois calls them undersheriffs. I'm not sure what they're called here. Captains.
Okay.
The whoever's just below the sheriff. But the fun fact is that if there's ever papers that need to be served on the sheriff, I would get to do that.
Yeah. which is, it's interesting. Like, I mean, I would have never drawn the parallel that, like, as far as that ranking, if you will, would go, is that kind of puts you above them if the need ever arose.
Right. If you go back in the whole coroner thing is kind of fascinating. If you go back to Old England, the coroner was called the crowner.
Yep.
And he was part of the crown. He worked for the king. And the idea of the coroner was when the sheriff went out to collect taxes, and the sheriff came back and said, well, this person has passed away, the coroner, or back then the crowner, would be sent out to verify that person had indeed passed away, because, well, we all know that there's shady people out there. And, then they would come back and say, yes, they have passed away, so there's no monies. And that transferred, that came across the ocean to here. We became coroners. And, well, we don't worry so much about the taxes anymore. But
it's definitely transformed into something a little different than what it was. Yeah, it's quite interesting. Okay, well, that is kind of the fun facts I had. One other thing I want to call out, which I think is probably a pretty prestigious award, is in 2021, you were given the Outstanding Coroner of the Year award. Does that tie into the work that you did on these cold cases, or how does somebody achieve that award?
I am, to be perfectly honest with you, I don't know how I ended up with that. I'm guessing that it had a lot to do with that. I work very closely. I don't want to say I'm very well known. It makes me sound like I'm patting myself on the back, but I know the Coroners Association people very well. And whenever I would have a question, especially with the unidentifieds, I would call them, keep them in the loop of how things were going. So that's I'm going to guess that's probably it.
Yeah.
Because I was one of the first. I don't want to sound like I'm patting myself on the back, but to my knowledge, I was one of the first coroners to take on some of these cases. And hopefully we'll get into how I ended up with these cases, but there was a ton of work. A lot of years went by. A lot of frustration went into it. A lot of highs and lows. and then getting them identified through the advancement of DNA and whatnot. I believe I was one of the first, and then Jasper County, who we were, Andy over in Jasper County and I were working very close together because he had a Larry Eiler case as well. And so we were working very close together. And once I identified mine, I believe it was then that he identified his through basically the same means, not the same groups of people, but it's kind of created this snowball effect where, again, Identify Indiana comes in and runs with these cases because it is a long, drawn-out process. It's not like you watch on TV where the CSI or whatever show you're going to watch where in 40 minutes they have the case solved. In 4 or 5 months, maybe you're close.
Yeah. So before we dive into that, I got one more thing because I do want to get into that stuff. That is, you're spot on. That is exactly why I wanted you here. And the sheriff's actually the one that recommended I speak with you because I was trying to get into some of the cold case stuff that I'd seen online. And he's like, you want to talk to Scott. Scott's your guy for that. Are you familiar with the DB Cooper case?
Yes.
Okay. So
who's not?
Yeah, I know. It's fascinating. And I'm, as you can see, looking around in here, I'm into the outdoors and I love to hunt and stuff. And
so you're planning on hijacking a plane and
and jumping out the rear end of it? Yeah, no, it's not in the cards for me, I don't think. But Steven Ornella, he owns Meat Eater. That's a big outdoor company. They do a really good podcast and stuff. And they're actually getting ready. I think it's on the History Channel. They're releasing a series, and they actually dive into DB Cooper. And what's ironic, and where this ties back into this is through DNA. So Dan Cooper, DB Cooper, whatever you want to call it, he smoked cigarettes while he was on the plane and left them on the plane, and they burned those cigarettes and got rid of that evidence, not having the foresight to think that DNA could develop to where they could potentially identify this person. What are your thoughts when you hear that, when you think of the stuff you've been through?
Well, back then, nobody thought about DNA. Nobody thought that the technologies would be so that you would be able to do that, especially now with the genetic genealogy, the forensic genetic genealogy. 5-10 years ago, if you would have said that to somebody, they would have laughed at you.
Yeah,
and now we're doing it almost on a daily basis.
You would have got committed to the psych ward.
Yeah, it's crazy how fast things have progressed.
Yeah, it's astonishing, and that I love the DB Cooper story. I'm not as into it as probably 90% of the people are, but I just find it very fascinating. I've watched some docuseries on it and stuff, and the DNA side of things is it's scary how powerful it can be, not only from the tools you use it as, but also when you think about like medical treatment and stuff like that they're starting to look into as well.
Yeah, the genetics is a big thing. Now I've actually, now that I've reached that certain age, you start getting things in the mail about Alzheimer's and stuff, and they want you to join in these groups and do genetic testing and things, and it's fascinating that they can do that they can, and once they pinpoint something, that they can change it. They can actually change somebody, and kind of frightening.
Yeah. It makes you wonder what the long-term consequences are, but maybe in your 60s, 70s, 80s, it's not as big of a concern. But yeah, do you think of that long-term impact? I know when COVID was going on and, whether people should get the shot or not, the vaccine, there was talks where it changes your genetic makeup and all that too. And if it does, I don't know, but that's probably for another time. Well, let's dive into what made me wanting to get you on the podcast. So when I first moved here and decided to start this podcast, I was trying to decide on some topics, and I just Googled unsolved crimes for Newton County, and one of them that I stumbled across was the 4 bodies they found up by Lake Village. I think it was discovered by some mushroom hunters. Was that one of your cold cases?
Those were, excuse me, those were 2 of my cold cases.
Okay.
There were 4 bodies that were found. They knew right away that they were victims of Larry Eiler, the serial killer. 2 of them were identified rather quickly. and 2 remained unidentified, and they were put in boxes. After I became the coroner, the boxes appeared in my office, and literally all I had to go on was on the boxes were written victim 3 and victim 4.
Can you tell me what year this is?
This is
so we can establish a timeline.
Well, when the bodies were found, it was 1983.
Okay.
When I found them, when I took over was 2009.
Oh wow.
So the first part of 2009. So for all those years, these boxes just remained on a shelf.
Yep.
And back then, I was the first coroner in Newton County to actually have a quote unquote office, my own office. Coroners back then would just pass the records down to whoever the new coroner was, and they would keep them at their house. Which back then we had Dr. Dennis, so he had he had his dental office. But the boxes ended up in my office, and they were labeled victim 3, victim 4, and inside, I'm cleaning the office out, trying to straighten things up, and I pick the box up and kind of shake it, and there's this weird sound. It's like, I should probably open this up. I open it up, and it's full of bones, and there was just a little piece of paper, like a page that had the corner torn off of it, and it had a case number, and I knew from looking at it that it was an Indiana State Police case number. It had 13-4, or District 13. Zone 4 is us. So I called them. I said, what is this? And post command told me, said, well, you don't need to bother with that. That's a cold case that it's solved. I said, well, no, it's not. I have the skeletal remains here in my office. And he's like, let me put you on hold. And the next thing I know, I'm being assigned a detective to work with me. So we worked side by side, and kind of ran with that case. But that's where those were. Those were the first 2 that I had. And in my office as well was literally a garbage bag, which just breaks your heart. But this was a girl that had been found in Willow Slough in 1988.
Okay.
She had been shot and some tires thrown on top of her and her body burnt. So those were what I had to work with.
So she was part of that case too?
She was not part of the Larry Eiler case.
Okay.
She's totally, matter of fact, her case is still an open homicide case.
Okay. So 83 to 2009 is 26 years, if my math's right. And all that time goes by, nobody's working on this case. You become the coroner, find the box, and what happens then? So you got the deputy assigned to you. What transpires after that?
I had a state police detective assigned to me, and I went to I don't want to say detectives, the county officers that worked the Larry Eiler case.
And he was the highway killer or something.
Yeah, he was dubbed the highway killer because he worked from Chicago to Terre Haute, and he would dump bodies along 41 and along, I believe it's 57 in Illinois.
Okay.
So they just dubbed him the highway killer.
Okay.
And what he had done, or what he would do, is he would pick up hitchhikers, or go to the various bars, either in Chicago or in Terre Haute, and pick somebody up, and then, hey, you want some drugs? And he would drug them and brought them here. The place in Lake Village was a perfect killing place. It was an old abandoned barn. He would take them in there. The weeds were all grown up. Take them back there, and he could basically play with them for hours before he killed them.
Wow.
He was quite demented.
Yeah. And he got put to death, correct?
He did not. He was on death row in Illinois. He cut a deal. If he would give all the names that he could remember, they would take him off of death row. But he ended up dying of AIDS in 1999, I believe it was.
Okay. So he was dead before you took office.
Yeah, he knew he was dying, and he cut that deal. He didn't want to be in, when you're on death row, you're in solitary confinement 23 hours a day. He didn't want that. He wanted to get back into general population and be able to talk to people before he died.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So when you got that assigned to you, what's that process look like from, like, walk us through from the box being found and noticing there's a case assigned to it to the day you find out who it is?
Oh my. There's no steps because that was all new. That was something that just, at least in Newton County, never happened before. So I met with the state police detective, and we, kind of compared notes. He brought down all of the notes that the case reports and whatnot, and we went through those. We thought, well, we need to find out as much as we can of these skeletal remains. All we have is skeletons. I did some research and found that there was a forensic anthropologist in Indianapolis. Back then, it was Dr. Stephen Naraki. So I called him and asked him if he would be willing to take a look at these. Of course he would, because that's what he does.
Mm-hmm.
So we took all three of them down there. They were in the two boys were in banker's boxes, just tattered up cardboard boxes, and like I said, she was in a garbage bag. So I had gotten some totes from the dollar store and put them in there, made little labels up, if you will, to identify them. And I thought, in my mind, a case number will not do them justice, because numbers we forget. So I gave them names, and I just took one, and this is A, this is B, and this is C, Adam, Brad, and Charlene. And we took them down to Dr. Naraki's office. Now, you have to understand, Dr. Naraki's office is a classroom. That's what he does. He's a professor at Indianapolis University. And so there's all these graduate students around. And I took these boxes in there and dropping them off. And they were going to, I don't know if you've ever seen on TV where they have a skeleton laid out on a table
Mm-hmm.
and put back. Well, that's exactly what they do. They basically reassemble these people, catalog all of the bones. He was actually able to find the knife marks on the two boys where they had been stabbed and the knife nicked the bones. But everybody in the class came over and started looking in the boxes, and they looked at the names and they kind of chuckled. And I looked at him, I said, and I explained just why I did that. I said, I can't forget a name.
Mm-hmm.
You have to remember this is somebody. And I mean, you could have dropped a pin in that room. I gained so much respect from them, from those students. And I respect those students so much because of what they were able to do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they were able to give me a height, an approximate height, approximate weight, sex. I mean, it was amazing the things that they can do. It took several months to get all three of them done, but it was well worth the time. Now, while they were doing that, my state police detective friend and I, we were going through all of the records. We even started re-interviewing people that had any connection to the case. We had traveled all over Indiana and Illinois, knocking on doors and talking to people, and it just kept running into brick walls. And I was reading, I don't remember whether it was the internet, but I ran across a book that had been written about Larry Eiler. And it was written by a woman named Geraldine Kolorak, who was back during that was a reporter for one of the Chicago newspapers. I don't know if it was Chicago Trib. Sorry about that.
No, it's all good.
She was a reporter with the Chicago Tribune, and she's literally the one that made the connection that this was a serial killer. Because even today, it's hard to get two states to communicate with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And back then, it was hard to get counties to talk to each other. So nobody was talking to each other to put together the fact that, well, we're finding a body here, we're finding one here, and they all have the same injuries. They've all been stabbed to death, and the pants are all down around their ankles. Just the weird things that Larry would do. She's the one that put it together. And so she wrote a book about it. So I thought, well, I'll give her a call. So I called her. Her and I became friends. We talked back and forth. She put me in touch with Larry Eiler's attorney, Kathleen Zellner.
What where are we at time wise? Okay.
My dates.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, fall apart. It was early. It was fairly early on. Within 2 years, I had reached out to Geraldine, and we would actually went up and talked to Kathleen Zellner, who was Larry's last attorney. She's the one that got the confessions out of him to get him to hopefully in his mind to get him off of death row. She shed a lot of light on Larry Eiler, but not so much on who these kids could be. So again, we just keep running into brick wall after brick wall. Then comes along, I don't know how many different times I had put the kids up. I always referred to them as my kids.
Mm-hmm.
There were several times I just put them up and walked away. You're like run into so many brick walls, you just kind of give up, and then you get a phone call from somebody. I think this might be fill in the blank.
So and so.
So it kind of reignites the case, and we run with it. I call Dave, my state police detective, and we run that lead down, and it turns into nothing. And then the DNA comes along. The first place that we reached out to was the University of North Texas. They are the original people, I guess you could say, that did the DNA. But the DNA that they did back then was compared to today's, is very rudimentary.
Mm-hmm.
But they ran what was called NamUs, the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, which is a computer database that coroners if we have unidentified remains, we plug in as much information into this database as we can. And on the other end is either law enforcement or the general public who have somebody that's gone missing. They start plugging information in, and it tries to match them up.
Mm.
So it matched, we gave us a few matches that, again, ended up going literally nowhere. And then DNA came along, the advancements of DNA came along, and there was a group called the DNA Doe Project. And I contacted them and asked them if they'd be willing to run with these cases. And they took on the case of the girl, my girl that we found out at Willis Slough. And she's the first one that I had any notion that they could do the genetic genealogy, where they take this DNA, they upload it into GEDmatch, which is anybody can get into GEDmatch. It's free. You can upload your DNA. If you go through, like I went through Ancestry.com.
Mm-hmm.
You see that advertised all the time. And then you can take that, I don't want to say that DNA, but that profile, which is, they call it a kit. And all it is if you open it, it's just numbers, X's and O's or whatever. But you upload that into GEDmatch, and it will try to find matches of your relatives.
Okay.
So GEDmatch is the only system, if you will, that allows unidentifieds to be uploaded. So they uploaded the unidentified, and it started, the way they work it is they work backwards,
mm-hmm.
which, again, I can spell DNA. That's about as far as I can go with it. But they were able to, and it took them a long time. I mean, it took almost a year of them, and they're all volunteers. They do this for free. It's just a group of people. They're literally all over the world, linked by computers, and they go online and they do searches, and they build out family trees, but they build them out backwards from what we would do. And then once they get so far out that they can't go anymore, then they start building them forward again to try to find where somebody might be missing. And with DNA in the system, you go into GEDmatch, it'll come back with what's called a centimorgan. And the larger the number of centimorgans that you have, the closer you are to being a relative. So they can go back and they can say this person is a third cousin twice removed. And then you just start building from there. And that's what they ended up doing. And we were fortunate that the girl, her sister, had uploaded her DNA. And we were able to get a match to the sister. And then we found out that she had a daughter. When she went missing, she had an infant daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And we reached out to the daughter and we got a 1-to-1 match, 100% match on that. So it's very fascinating. It's very tedious kind of work. And we've went from the DNA Doe Project or to the Indiana State Police now have their own genealogy people that we work with. So a new case comes along, I will be able to send a piece of bone to the Indianapolis lab. They will extract the DNA and they can do genetic genealogy for free.
Wow. And so what was the story with Charlene, I guess I'll call her?
She was, her name ended up being Jennifer.
Okay.
And she was from Texas, is where they were originally from. She was moving up to Joliet. She came to Joliet by herself to set up household, and then the rest of the family was going to follow. She just went missing. The family tried and tried and tried to get a missing persons report on her, for the police to take it, and they kept telling her, well, she's an adult, she can go missing if she wants. And they refused to take a missing persons report. So for all these years, had a missing persons report been filed, we probably could have solved that case really early on.
Yeah.
But they didn't. And at this point, I guess it doesn't matter. I mean, we got her identified. And this is the girl that I was telling you earlier that I fly out to Boston every year and we do lunch.
Is this the daughter or the sister?
This is the daughter.
Okay. That's pretty amazing. Couldn't imagine the emotions that go through that.
Well, we actually, I don't think we flew them here, but they flew here. Once we had a positive ID, we talked to them on the phone. When I say we, the prosecutor's office actually stepped in and helped us with this, got us discounts on a room at Fair Oaks, flew them in. They stayed here a couple of days to make arrangements.
Mm-hmm.
And everything. We took him out to the site where she was found, and just basically got to know him. And ever since then, we've been kind of family.
Yeah. That's powerful stuff. 30 to 40 years, and I just couldn't imagine. That's a lot of sleepless nights. And
it is hard to imagine. It's hard to wrap your head around, one, somebody being missing that long, and two, as we were going through this, as I was going through this, looking for them, I couldn't wrap my head around somebody not looking for them.
Mm-hmm.
And then you find out that they just didn't know where to look.
Yeah.
Or how to look.
Imagine from Texas all the way to Chicago, that is a long ways to be looking.
That is. And I don't want to dismiss the fact that they were, in my opinion, the Joliet police did them wrong by not taking that report. But I understand that as adults, if we want to go missing, we can.
Yeah.
But it's just unusual for somebody to go missing and leave all of their personal belongings behind and their child behind.
Yeah.
Without ever, for, like you said, 30 years, never making contact.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's astonishing. And nowadays, what does it take to have a missing persons report filed? Because I know there's stipulations around that.
To be perfectly honest, I don't know the actual requirements. They say that you have to be missing for at least 24 hours. I don't think that's really the case.
Okay.
I think a lot of that is just a misnomer that people are told that, well, if somebody goes missing, you need to wait for a while to see if they come home. Because usually, at any one given time, I don't remember what the number is, but the number is astonishing. Like 40,000 people go missing every year, but they return. somebody might go missing for a week and then come back.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they say to wait. Let's wait and see if they return. I don't think that, like here in Newton County, I think they would take a missing persons report if somebody went missing 20 minutes ago, if you were sure that they were truly missing
Mm-hmm.
and not just, over visiting a friend or whatever. I mean, that's why they say to wait.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's I just couldn't imagine what that feels like and what you go through as a parent, a family member, loved one, whatever the case may be. I just can't imagine what that's really like, and I hope I never have to. So the DNA doe project, is that still alive and well?
They are. They
Okay.
are. They are very much alive and well. Still solving cases. I don't want to say we've stepped away from them, but since the Indiana State Police now have the availability of doing that, and they want to build their team out, I'm kind of going to go to them first, and since I have a good working relationship with them anyway, and let them run with it first, and then if we run even colder, then I'll reach back out to the DNA Doe Project people.
Okay. So walk me through the state one. Walk me through that. Like, so what's the difference? How did that get started? What's your role in it?
In what now?
The Indiana one that you were talking about earlier, and we said we'd get back to.
Identify Indiana?
Yes, thank you.
Well, as I was working these cases with Dr. Latham, now you have to understand, time has passed. Dr. Naraki, who was the original anthropologist, he had semi-retired. He stopped doing field work and only wanted to teach. He's also a professor. He still teaches, but he doesn't actively do cases. Dr. Krista Latham stepped in, and her and I started working together. And at that time, she had 60 cases in her office. And she's like, Scott, we've got to do something. And her and I were, I would be down there at her office, or we'd be on the phone, or we'd be talking via email. And she's the one that originally came up with the idea. We need to come up with a group and do this. We need to do this and get these cases solved. So she's the one that put the bug in my head, and I'm the one that ran with it. Since then, we've built this group up to, there's the last meeting we had 15 people at it, and it included myself, who represents the coroners, Dr. Krista Latham, who represents the Indiana, the trying to think of what she calls her office now. It's the Center for Human Identification.
Okay.
Indiana State Police Lab down in Indianapolis, which we can use any lab in the state police. The state police have 4 labs, but Indy seems to be the one that go to for bone and for this type of work. And we've got the Fusion Center involved, and most people have never even heard of the Fusion Center. They're an arm of the state police that they are like an information fusion group, and the things they can tell you about people is frightening.
Really?
Oh, they can dig back, and literally in a matter of minutes. We were sitting in this meeting and we mentioned somebody's name, and the girl's over here typing on her computer, and I mean, she's telling us literally everything about this person. So they're a huge asset. So, once we get DNA, we come back with, we load it up into GEDmatch, and we start seeing, well, this person could be related very distantly to this person. They can type into their computer and come up with not only that person's information, but all of their relatives' information.
Wow. And
that it will hopefully make things a lot faster, move a lot faster. But that's Identify Indiana. Her and I, Dr. Latham and I, had talked back and forth, and I finally decided that we needed to run with it. And so I applied for our nonprofit status. We're officially nonprofit, and I have reached out to various coroners, not all of them yet, but some that I'm close with, and I've so far inherited, I think, up to 20 cases. So it's going to be a daunting daunting 2025.
So is that what retirement looks like for
That's
you?
what retirement looks like for me. I do more now than I did when I worked.
My goodness. So how many cold cases exist in Newton County that sit with you outside of that project? Like how many are on the coroner's cold case list right now? Or are they solved?
In Newton County?
Yes, sir.
None.
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 So they've
Well,
all been solved.
I say that. That's not entirely true. There is a grave that we found. Somebody had reached out to me in the last few months and said there's a grave, and I don't remember what the name of it's a tiny little cemetery just north of the shooting range.
You're talking the one by Willis Slough?
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you go up, I believe that's 600 west, north of the shooting range on the left-hand side, on the west side, there's a small private cemetery, and there's a grave there that's just marked the stranger.
Oh boy.
Yeah, and the story behind that one's quite fascinating. I didn't know this, but back in the day, there was a train that ran through there, and there was actually a town. I don't remember what the name of the town is off the top of my head, but they hauled cattle.
Mm-hmm.
Was primarily the function of the rail line. They would haul cattle from here up to the stockyards in Chicago. Well, the train arrived here in Newton County, and there was a person on there that was deceased. Nobody knew who it was. I am assuming they worked hard trying to find out who it was, but they couldn't, and the townspeople buried him or her, we don't know which it is, in a grave and just marked it the stranger. There's no date, there's no anything. So my wife and I have kind of done some digging, no, well, maybe pun intended. and it's a fascinating story. And I was also told there's one in Kentland, at one of the cemeteries in Kentland, where a woman back in the 50s was hit by a car and was never identified. So there are some that are buried because after so long you have to do something with the body. A body can't just keep forever. So they bury them in unmarked graves, which is the sad part because a lot of the records from back then are lost. So we will never, if there are some, we may never know it.
Yeah.
But those are two that I know of in Newton County. But those are not active cases.
Right.
I mean, nobody's come and said, "Hey, you need to identify these people."
Right.
If they did, then we'd have to start working on figuring out how to exhume the body and get the DNA that way.
Wow. Those are, it probably sound terrible, but like more of a fun case, right? Because there's not a serial killer out active or anything like that with these bodies, right?
Well, we don't know that.
Right. That's true.
I'm sure there's not. No, those would be fun.
Yeah.
Those would be fun to work. It would be interesting to work, but there again, there's a lot of legalities with exhuming a body, and then I don't know. It would be something that I'm not saying I wouldn't be willing to do, but I'm not sure that my county commissioners and county council would have
want you spending time on
want
that?
me to spend the time and money on that.
Yeah. But that's something you could work on through your Indiana project though, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so when you work on, I keep forgetting the name of it. One more time.
Identify Indiana.
Identify Indiana. So when you're working on something like that, and you said that one of the coroner's offices has basically handed you 20 cases potentially, Newton County's not going to foot that bill. Your project is, right? Your Identify Indiana is going to be what pays for that work, or do you get subsidized from those other counties too, or?
No, that will all be done through Identify Indiana.
Okay.
Which usually right now, the way things have worked and the way things worked even with the kids, the three that we did have here in Newton County, the vast majority of that literally, and I'm not patting myself on the back, but the vast majority of that came out of my pocket.
Oh my.
Yeah.
So like hotels, fuel, I mean, all that.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Good for you.
Well, like I said, after a while, it became a passion.
Mm-hmm.
I whenever I talked about them, I referred to them as my kids because they were I have my own children at home, but these were my kids.
Yeah.
They belonged to somebody. It became literally a passion to get these identified. So it didn't bother me to, and it wasn't real expensive. Most places did everything for free. The anthropological studies. I take that back. Not everything was paid for out of my pocket. The anthropological studies which were done by the University of Indianapolis. The county did pay for those. But the driving down there was out of my pocket. The staying the nights in the hotels were out of my pockets. And I didn't care. I mean, I still don't care.
What'd your wife think about all that?
Initially we weren't married then.
Okay.
So she didn't know about that, but she has, she's helped. Well, she's been involved since the first identification. And she's 100% on board. Her and I, when we took Johnny down to Kentucky, he was the first boy that was identified from Larry Eiler. We just made it a vacation. Took a long weekend, took him down there on a Friday, and we stayed till Sunday and enjoyed the scenery. Sounds bad,
right?
Right. In a way sounds bad, but we got to meet the family. We got to meet the funeral director, who I still email back and forth, and he's on Facebook and whatnot. We joke back and forth on different things. When you have something like that, a case like that, and I reached out to the funeral director down there. They did everything free. The funeral was free. They had the family was really, really worried that the media it was going to be a media circus, and they didn't want that. So at first they weren't even going to allow us down there. They're like, no, we don't want to do this because we don't want the media. They had us block off the cemetery so that nobody would come in. Nobody even tried. We didn't make it known that we were going to be down there. It was very private. But the funeral director, we met him at the funeral home, turned the body over, and he had a full-size casket. And you have to remember, these are just bones. So I had him in an infant casket. He had a full-size casket there so that nobody would ask any questions. And everything was free.
Wow.
So, it's under normal circumstances, it would be very expensive to do a lot of the things that we've done, but we've been good enough, gracious, and I don't know how to word it, lucky enough maybe, that everybody stepped up and helped out with funeral arrangements, all three of them. Everything was just astronomical how willing people are to help in a situation like that.
Yeah. So maybe we'll step back just a little bit then. So you identified the lady. She was from Texas. This gentleman was from Kentucky. Where was the third one from?
Third one was from Chicago.
Okay.
South side of Chicago. I'm going to get off on another story here because you were relating something early on about watching a documentary.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a documentary coming out in a couple of months featuring me.
Oh, really?
The National Geographic was doing a documentary on DNA, on the DNA process, and they sent a film crew. Now, this is back when everybody was on strike, so they sent a film crew from the UK. These guys flew over. They wanted to meet with us for a couple of hours, and because we'd been working these cases, we had solved 2. We were on our last one. They wanted to see, what we had done, but their main focus was going to be on the DNA Doe Project people and how they do their job. Well, while they were here, literally filming, they're in my office at the government center. They've got their cameras set up, the microphone set up. We get a phone call and we positively identify the last one.
No way.
Yeah, all on film. So that film now had switched from the DNA Doe Project to the Scott Show.
Wow.
And they filmed us going back in time. When I reached the end of my second term, I was done. I in my mind, I was done. I couldn't go any farther. So we actually held a funeral for all 3 of them at the government center, invited all these people in and the general public. And this is the part that makes me feel really good about the community that I live in. We figured these were kids. The two boys were kids anyway. So I reached out to the high schools and said, I need some volunteers to be pallbearers for this funeral. I need 6. I need 6 people. We ended up with 19.
Wow.
19 kids from North Newton and South Newton showed up. We had over 100 people show up for the funeral that we held. We had people fly in from Washington, D.C., from the NCMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, flew out and spoke. That was very moving for me. That was the finale for me. That was going to be the exit. Exit Scott. He's done. The cemetery, Riverside Cemetery in Brook, had offered up a crypt in the mausoleum, so that if we ever did identify him, it'd be easy to get them out as opposed to burying him. And we ended up putting them in there. Well, I'm digressing a little bit, but the film crew that came here wanted videos of us in the mausoleum, us out in the field where the bodies had been found of the 2 boys. They wanted to focus on the Larry Eiler case, not so much, the last one we identified. Mm-hmm. And they were here for 2 weeks. The first time, they've been back 3 or 4 different times, finishing up things, and we still communicate via phone. That's a whole nother story. But if everything goes well, they said the first quarter of this year is when the documentary should come out.
Wow. And that's on the Discovery Channel?
It's going to be, I believe, Discovery Channel. I think they said Disney's. I think Disney owns Discovery. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. It'll be a Nat Geo, National Geographic.
Okay.
It's a 5-part series, but Newton County gets to be the first.
Wow.
So
that's neat.
It is.
Got a movie star in my studio.
Well,
huh?
I wouldn't go quite that far, but it is going to shed some light on how DNA works. And I'm, I looked this guy up that was the director, if you will, and he's won multiple awards, so he knows what he's doing as far as putting these things together to make it look very professional. So
sweet.
Hopefully it'll open some people's eyes up, because if you go, we've run into problems. I'm working a case with Benton County right now. They had a body that was found in a cornfield years ago, back in the 70s. And they've got it narrowed down to there's a potential relative in St. John, but he keeps avoiding us. And it's because of the fear of DNA. Everybody's afraid that, once that government gets my DNA, that's not the case. Once we get the DNA, once it's turned into a kit and ran, it's destroyed. It doesn't remain in the system. We're not going to track you down and use it against you in any way, shape, or form. It's just, we need to get this person identified. So keeping our fingers crossed on that one.
So you're saying they don't keep a record of that DNA? You would have to resubmit it again later?
Yeah.
Really? Yeah. That's the whole reason I've never done the 21andMe.
Well, no, the 21andMe, that stays in there as long as that's yours.
That's
now when you go on these, and maybe this is something that we can talk about a little bit. When you go on the Ancestry.com, 23andMe, there's a couple of other ones. Yeah. You own that DNA. That's yours. When you get ready to upload it, there's an opt-in or opt-out that you can do. That you have to check one or the other. If you're going to opt in, that means law enforcement can check your DNA. It allows anybody to check your DNA. Or you can opt out. Obviously, being the coroner, I always say, opt in, unless you've got something to hide.
Yeah.
Opt in, and that way we can, because you may not know that you had a second cousin twice removed that went missing, because second cousin twice removed is way down the line. But if we, as coroners or genealogists, have learned, that puts us in the right direction. So we need as many people as possible to upload their DNA.
It just seems so personal, and
it is.
Like, I don't have anything to hide, but to your point, I don't know if somebody in my distant family has been missing or not, right? But
or if they're a criminal.
Yeah, I don't know that, right? But I just, man, I don't think there's anything more personal about you than your DNA. I mean,
there's not. I mean, that's your genetic makeup.
Yeah,
you know, that is who you are.
Yeah, that's
But with again, with these, you can opt in, opt out, and you have total control of that kit. You can go in there one day and go and just click the button and it disappears. You can delete it. Now, when the police do that, I don't want to say there's nothing that says they can't. There's laws that say they cannot use that for anything. And it did happen one time in California where a woman had used, I don't remember how the whole story went, but they ended up, she had been raped, and they did a DNA, and they ended up getting her DNA and connected her to a crime that she'd committed prior or something.
Oh,
and
wow.
that law enforcement agency got in some mega trouble.
Yeah.
Because that's not the idea of this, and it gave everybody a black eye for the longest time. That's not what we do with that. When I go out, I've done DNA swabs for positive IDs on people on recent deaths, like a fire death where somebody's can't be identified visually. We'll do DNA, and once that DNA is done, once I've run it to the state police and they run it, it's destroyed. They don't upload that into a system. Now, when the skeletal remains, they will take a bone and they'll crush it and get some. Again, I can spell DNA.
Mm-hmm.
That is entered into the CODIS system, the combined DNA index, and that's there forever. That's the unidentified. That's not yours. That's not the people that are trying to compare to it.
Gotcha.
But with that being said, there are now they've gotten it to where every, and I'm not sure, might be wrong on this. Like if you're arrested, you get fingerprinted.
Mm-hmm.
I think now if you're convicted, your DNA is uploaded. So you hate to say it, but there could be somebody that is in prison whose DNA will point us in the right direction for unidentified.
Yeah.
So it's important to get it in there. It's important to explain to people that it's not going to be used against them in any way. It can't be. The law says it cannot be. If you give your DNA voluntarily for this type of project, they can't use that against you.
Gotcha. So in the case of the gentleman in St. John, they couldn't use that as something against him.
No, not if he gives it up voluntarily for this particular purpose.
Gotcha. Okay. So when stepping back then into the Identify Indiana, so in 4 years when you retire again, or whatever you want to call it, so that'll become the full-time gig for you, it sounds like. And go ahead.
I'm kind of hoping that I can hand it off in 4 years to somebody else. I'm hoping there will be somebody else that has the passion that I do. I'm getting up in age. I'm not as young as I used to be. I don't know. I guess we'll see in 4 years.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, I love doing this. There's no greater feeling than reuniting family, even though it's family of a deceased.
Mm-hmm.
It still needs to be done, and it still brings, I don't want to use that word closure, but it brings some sense of finality, if you will.
It makes them whole again.
Yeah.
Right.
The family now knows where their loved one's at.
Yeah.
And that is a passion of mine, and that's something that my wife and I can work together. We've since we've been together, she's been on board with this. She's helped me, through some of the strangest cases. We've done some really odd things. Well, the fact that we drove to Kentucky with human remains in the back of our car was a little odd, I guess.
Not everybody can say they've done that.
No, not everybody can say that.
Yeah. I get goosebumps when you're talking about it. I have a lot of empathy, and I just couldn't imagine that. And so You talked with Identify Indiana that by becoming a nonprofit, it opened up a bunch of, it can open up access to some funding, right? Some grants and stuff like that. What is that? Is that to kind of give you a little bit of a salary plus pay for some testing plus pay for hotels, fuel, etc.? Or
It depends on which grant we get. The big grant would, yes, it would actually, and I don't want a salary for doing this. I like doing it because I like doing it. But it would be nice to have the hotels reimbursed and maybe the mileage. But primarily, we're looking at the testing.
Okay.
If we have to send it to one of the big labs, there's Othram Lab in Texas, and there's the Bodie Lab out in, I think it's Washington. They're quite expensive. It could be up to $8,000 per
test
per
or
test.
DNA development.
So that's why a lot of the smaller counties haven't done anything, is because the financial end of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I was fortunate enough with my cases that I got hooked up with Othram Labs in Texas, and at the time, they were doing everything for free.
Yeah, they wanted to get it off the ground.
They wanted to get their name out there, and so they were doing them for free. They would crowdfund, and they had some philanthropists that donated monies. Now I think their initial cost is like $3,000 for basic testing, and $3,000 doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're dealing with small counties, especially this day and age, budgets are tight.
Oh yeah. Well, and that's probably a pretty big percentage of your overall budget.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, that's the other thing too. Anytime you're in a public office, such as the coroner's role, like you answer to the people essentially, right? I mean, you're using their tax dollars to, like, anytime you spend money, right? It's my tax dollars, your personal tax dollars, all that, right? And so
it is. And I've, as I worked the 3 cases that I had here in Newton County, I made sure that I was, in the media, letting the people know where I was at, what I was doing in regards to these cases, because it became, they became Newton County's kids. I think anyway, there were a lot of people out there that, that knew what I was doing and that felt that connection with these kids.
Yeah. Yep. What else do you want to share on that? On the Indiana, Identify Indiana, the DNA Doe project?
We're just going to have to wait. Maybe you'll have me back once Identify Indiana gets off the ground and really gets going. Well, I'll let you know how many cases I inherit from the one county, and we'll see. And maybe you can follow that. That would be kind of interesting to follow. At least, take one case and follow it through.
Yeah.
And you can be the official reporter.
That'd be cool. I would be very interested. Like I said, I have a lot of empathy, and if I could help with something like that, that would be really fun.
There are, I think Jasper County, I know he got his Larry Eiler case solved. I don't know that he has any other ones. Benton County has the one. We call her Benton Betty. Like I said, I always give them names. So we're working on getting Betty identified. That's a really interesting case in that he did the DNA, and they do the ethnicity. If you're familiar with how the DNA, the Ancestry.com and stuff works, she's 100% Croatian.
Oh,
so we know, at least in our hearts, that she's from the Chicago area. There's a very large Croatian neighborhood, if you will, in Chicago. I've actually reached out for Matt, for the coroner down there, reached out to them on Facebook and then got an email address and emailed them with the information of what we had. That ended up being a dead end. I don't know whether they understood what we were doing or what the problem was. That's where you run into the difficulties, when you run into people of foreign descent, which I guess we're all kind of that way. But Croatian is, it would be one thing if she was 50% Croatian,
right.
but being 100%, that's going to make it really, really difficult, especially if we have to go overseas for anything.
Yeah.
Which I have actually volunteered to go. If we have to, I will go to Croatia for them.
Yeah.
I'm kidding there, but anytime I can take a road trip, I'm down for it.
Yeah. I mean, I was running through my head. Is Croatia a safe place to be right now?
Probably not.
That'd be a tough one. So are you looking for help with the Identify Indiana, or like, is there a role the public can play? What's that look like? If you're in the market or thinking about switching to lithium batteries, you have to go check out Dakota Lithium Batteries. I installed a 36-volt set of batteries for my trolling motor and installed their cranking battery for the motor. These things are a game changer. They have batteries for solar equipment, golf carts, cars, boats, the duck blinds, and much more. Dakota Lithium Batteries are also backed by an 11-year warranty. For more information, go check them out online or give us a call at 308-379-8280.
At the present time, I don't, to be perfectly honest, I don't know. We're so new. Boy, it'd be nice to have somebody that could do media, like a media blitz with things. I'm trying to find somebody that's computer literate as far as like the Excel, because we need to. I know when I pick up these cases from the other county, it will have the county's case number. It will have, they're at Indiana University, Bloomington. It will have their number. It'll get an Identify Indiana case number. And then once it goes to Dr. Latham for her work, she'll give it a case number. We're going to need to figure out ways to search a database, especially if it truly is 20 cases that I'm inheriting from that county. There's an estimated, one thing we didn't mention, there's an estimated, and it's only an estimate because nobody has ever taken the time to find hard numbers. There's an estimated 600 to 1,000 unidentifieds just in Indiana.
Oh my.
Yeah. Nationwide, there's right around 40,000.
Wow.
So it could become.
Yeah.
Yeah. Could be very, very, a very lengthy job.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking, it's a lot.
What I would really like to find is some high school kids that are interested in this field that maybe would want to take over once I'm done. I had, years ago, I had a girl from North Newton who they wanted to do a job shadowing, and I'm like, job shadowing for the Newton County Coroner's Office is, well, you're going to be bored out of your mind. She was adamant she wanted to do it. So I'm like, okay, come on down. I cleared everything with her mom, had her sign off, and ended up taking her to the morgue down at Lafayette to introduce her to, because we don't have a morgue here in Newton County. Everything has to be done in Tippecanoe County. Took her down there, introduced, and from what I understand, she went to college, and now she, I helped her in her career that she's in now.
Yeah.
So,
that reminds me of a topic I was talking to the sheriff about. So we had, he's talking about a service program. I don't know if you've listened to that podcast at all, but he's the most recent episode I've done was with the sheriff. And he's looking at starting a service program, which is an acronym, which is essentially trying to get, I think he said 13 to 18-year-olds kind of involved and teach them some things, like maybe put a judge in front of them and talk about what a judge is, what they do. I wonder if you'd be a good fit, like your role would be a good fit for that program as well, because that was what we talked about is, exposing these younger kids to different trades and jobs, if you will. It can help set their career path or let them know that's not one they're interested in. Right. And I think that's huge.
I would be totally into that. I love sharing information. I think this is a fascinating field. the coroner's office, and thank goodness isn't as busy as the big cities, which gives us a little bit more time to do things like we're doing today, or to show people what we really do. We get some unusual cases. We get the unidentifieds, and that's what this girl, she would come down. I don't remember how many years she worked with me. She would come down, and at the end of the year, I always go through and organize my case files, put them in a better order, and she would sit down and do that for me. She just really was into that, and it would be nice to find some kids. I don't young adults that are interested maybe in a forensics field, and maybe I can point them in the right direction. I know that Shannon, the sheriff, they do their forensic thing. I'm actually a certified CSI, if you will, through Texas A&M, and it's a fascinating field. And if somebody were interested, I'd be more than happy to lead them around and point them in the right direction.
And you got a ton of contacts.
Yeah,
you've got a lot of people you can help expose them to, and
like I said, we don't have that many cases here, but my goodness, I can send you down to Lafayette, Tippecanoe County, or up to Lake County if you're really feeling brave.
Yeah.
I don't even go there.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. That's good. I think I'm out of questions for you. I'm wondering, what haven't we discussed that you want to make sure people are aware of?
I don't know. I think we've hit it all.
Okay.
I think.
I don't know if it's my questions were good or if you were reading off of my phone or something, but like literally as we went, you were hitting all of the topics that I had that I wanted to talk to you about. So I appreciate you taking the time, first of all, and I just want to thank you for all your efforts and the things you've done. I know if I were one of those families with a missing loved one and you were able to do something like that, it would mean the world to me. So just want to thank you on behalf of the people you have helped, and look forward to seeing that documentary. And yeah, let's talk and see if we can figure out a way to, I guess, document the process as you go through that and see if we can help you out.
That would be awesome. I think that would be fascinating for you, and it would be fascinating for the listeners.
Yeah. I think it'd be a very interesting thing. I actually, when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life coming out of high school, I actually was going to go for a 4-year degree in criminal justice, and CSI was just taking off, and that was something I was interested in. I did ride-alongs with the cops and stuff, and due to the frightening idea of 4 years of more college, I elected to go a different path into the trades initially, and then went back for a 4-year degree. But this is like crime shows and stuff are right up my alley. I really enjoy them. So yeah, I'd be happy to see if I can get involved and help you out a little bit.
Cool. I don't know what got me into this. No, I honestly don't. When I started back in 1982, I was an EMT in 1981. I was certified as an EMT. The way I got that was a friend of mine who was on the fire department wanted to go through EMT training, but he didn't want to go alone. So I thought, okay, I'll go. He ended up dropping out because he didn't like it. I ended up staying in because I loved it. And that they have that old saying that if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. Yeah. I swear, I worked for Newton County for 34 years as a medic, and it wasn't up until the last 5 years that I think I actually worked.
Yeah.
I mean, I loved that job. I don't know what it was that made me want to do that. I mean, if you had told me back in high school, this is what you're going to do, I would have said, you're nuts. But no, I loved it. And I got to meet so many people, working in a small county like Newton. I literally, that's the only downfall to being the coroner now is that over the 34 years working for the ambulance service, I know almost everybody. If I don't know them, I know somebody in their family or a friend of theirs. Somehow I know everybody. And that part makes it kind of difficult in a way, but the coroner also gets to bring some, I hate that word, closure. But when I show up, it's always been kind of a motto of mine that if I can make somebody laugh before I leave, I've done my job.
Mm-hmm.
And I've obviously, as the coroner, you see people literally at the worst,
Mm-hmm.
the worst point in their life.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many times I've left people's houses and they were smiling.
It's amazing.
It's just, the ability to be able to do that for somebody, to kind of take that worst day of their life and make it just a tiny bit better, makes it all worthwhile.
Just a little ray of sunshine,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, just a little something that gives them hope that things are going to get better.
Yeah. There's a brighter day ahead for sure. Yeah. Yeah, I'd imagine you showing up in a circumstance like that isn't the best day for sure.
No, that's what I told your wife this morning when I showed up. She says, "Are you the coroner?" I said, "Yeah, it's never a good day when the coroner shows up at your door."
Yeah, at least you knew you were coming, right?
Well, that'd make it even scarier.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah. Well, awesome. Again, thank you for your time. And yeah, we'll definitely be chatting and we'll get you back on here for sure at a minimum. So
awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Thanks, Scott. We'll try and get him on the show. Thank you. See you next time.